Marx's labor theory of value. What is this presentation about? It is shown that value is formed differently than the classical interpretation of Marx's labor theory of value describes. Value is ultimately based on work, but it cannot be derived directly from it. It is only formed on the market. With a contemporary interpretation of Marx's theory of value, this can be applied to all value formations, to technical products, natural goods, artworks, ideas, etc. Expanding on Marx's views, it is shown that in addition to human workers, machines and parts of nature are also used as labor forces and contribute to value creation in the same way as human workers. The connection between the use of Marx's theory of value in practice and the failure of the socialist economic system is presented. Economics is always about relationships between people. What is the goal in declaring the value? The goods with which the economy is concerned are the reference points of such a relationship. For the exchange, that means for a value relationship, an initially potential buyer and an initially potential seller usually face each other. Within the framework of such a relationship, value is formed with the exchange as a relationship between them, with which they relate the goods to be exchanged to one another. Both bartering partners agree on a common value and assign this one to both exchange goods in the same size. The equivalence of value is made clear, among other things, by the fact that neither the seller nor the buyer has to add a bottle of champagne to the object of exchange or to the agreed sum of money. Regardless of how they subjectively assess the value of the exchange goods, objectively they agree on the common value independently. The exchange goods are the reference points of a value relationship, but do not contain any values themselves. There are no intrinsic values. The exchange goods can be industrial or agricultural products, works of art, archaeological finds, ideas such as patterns and literature, or activities such as concerts, etc. The classic interpretation of the labor theory of value. A female entrepreneur has manufactured a device, in this example a drone. To do this, she needs machines, raw materials, supplier products, communication, etc., the constant capital. She buys labor forces, Marx assumes only human labor, the variable capital. She pays them only for a part of their working time. In the other part of their working time, the so-called unpaid working time, the labor forces of the entrepreneur create the surplus value. She appropriates the surplus value without giving anything in return to the labor forces. The labor forces create the value with their work and bring it into the work products or couple it to the work products. This gives the commodities their value. The value results from the cost C plus V and the surplus value S. Marx describes the formation of value with his value formula W equals C plus V plus S. An important feature also in all further developments of this idea remains that value is created directly on the production side of the commodity society. There is a buyer who buys the commodity. He can buy the commodity above the value, at the value, or below the value, depending on the market situation. The classic theory of value with question marks. But does the commodity really have the value W equals C plus V plus S? According to Marx, value and surplus value are created through so-called abstract labor. That means, in his view, with production. But that's clearly wrong. The surplus value can only be paid by the buyer on the market, because surplus value means that the entrepreneur earns more from the sale of the goods than she has paid for the production and providing. The entrepreneur can only estimate how much surplus value she can expect. That means she only specifies an expected surplus value. Value cannot be produced or created. Since the surplus value is part of the value cannot exist until it is clear whether the surplus value is paid, and if so, how much. In addition, the surplus value is not paid on the costs, but on the reimbursement of the costs. That happens in the market. According to Marx, only socially useful work creates value. However, the therefore necessary purchase decision is only made on the market. Only costs arise on the production side of the commodity society. The work required for this was abstract only for upstream value relationships and purchases from external parties. The workers also only perform private work for the entrepreneur, and the work results also remain in the private sphere of the entrepreneur. Private work is not socially necessary, so it is neither abstract nor does it create value. The term surplus value is out of place here. Even money that would be paid to the entrepreneur from an imaginary source for costs C and V would not be surplus value, because this would only reduce a part of the costs. Before the product is sold, no part of the private work can be qualified as surplus work and its result as surplus value. Only if a buyer on the market completely replaces the costs with the purchase and pays even more, that means the surplus value, then a corresponding part of the working time is also paid by the buyer. Only then can the shares of social necessary labor time and surplus time be determined. That means the times of abstract work. Before products are sold, there is only an expected surplus working time, an expected surplus value, and therefore only an expected value, and appropriately an expected abstract labor. The expected value is made visible as an offer price for the potential commodity. The value formula must be specified for the production side of commodity society. Let's look at the life cycle of a value relationship. It could be about a sales chain representative who is negotiating a contract with a businesswoman for the supply of drones in large numbers, and he wants to reduce the unit price in return. The entrepreneur has drones manufactured and calculates the expected value of 700 euros for one drone, which she links to her product as the offer price. She brings the product onto the market, and thus initiates one-sided a value relationship. A potential buyer checks the offer, but this potential buyer also wants to offer other things in his sales chain. So he has to weight his needs according to all possible desired goods. He particularly likes the offered drone. In other words, the potential buyer is interested in buying and weights the device at 500 euros. He communicates this to the provider. At a bazaar and in other situations, agreement is reached in dialogue. In a department store, a potential buyer must conform to the salesperson's specification if he is to be successful. The potential buyer and the entrepreneur form weighted needs for the exchange goods. At the same time, they subjectively value the exchange goods. The potential commodity drone and the value equivalent money are still the reference points of the value relationship. The entrepreneur compares the answer with her values. She is checking if she could go down from her asking price. In other words, the entrepreneur lowers the asking price and thus her expected value to 650 euros. The potential buyer agrees and accepts this sale price. The potential buyer and the entrepreneur have thus agreed on a common value. Since the weighted needs of both exchange partners for the exchange objects are still sufficiently strong under this condition, an exchange takes place. Only with the exchange to the 650 euros become an objective part of the value relationship, which only reflects a real value through the exchange, assigned to both the commodity and the value equivalent, and goes beyond each individual partner in this value relationship. There is no question that both bartering partners can still have completely different individual value concepts for the goods to be exchanged. But these would be one-sided, purely subjective, and not part of the value relationship. It is only through exchange that the common value is assigned to goods and value equivalents on a social level. With the exchange, buyer and entrepreneur end their value relationship. Only the exchange is an expression of the abstract usefulness of both exchange goods in the economic sense. With the exchange, the buyer accepts the expenses of the entrepreneur in a quantified abstract form. Buyer and seller agree to 650 euros, or to 700 euros, or to another value. But without an agreement, there will be no exchange. A sales price of 700 euros and a purchase price of 500 euros cannot be stated on the sales contract or on the invoice. A quantity of money symbolizes a right to a percentage of all goods to be distributed economically in society. The common value thus leads to an exchange of equal value because this right is the same for both exchange partners. The sales contract or the invoice is an objective element of the value relationship. Only the common value size can appear on this document. It is also objective as it goes beyond any exchange partner and acts on the societal level. The purchasing power is transferred at exactly this level, as are the goods. VAT is paid objectively based on the common value. Only on the market the socially relevant real surplus value is paid or is not paid. Since the value formula contains the surplus value, the value formula for the real value can only be related to the market. The value formula for the market shows that value and its magnitude are formed from the replacement of expenses plus the surplus value, but not directly from expenses to which an expected surplus value is added. With the value, the results of expenditures, that means functionality, quality and others, are recognized as being useful to society, but not the expenditures directly. The value formula also shows that the value is only formed in that height in which the expenditures will be accepted. Remarkably, according to Marx, a commodity that is useful for society is abstractly useful. That means it is useful regardless of its concrete form and embodiment. The abstract usefulness can only be recognized through exchange, and this is how the value is formed. Value is not determined by expenses. Such a value would be purely subjective and socially worthless, since anyone could always create value, whether someone buys the products or not. The value usually attributed to a product of work is the recognized expenditure for it plus an accepted surplus value. Let's consider the abstract, necessary and surplus work. Assumption: the company pays an average hourly wage of 50 euros. The workers take a total of 7 hours per drone. The entrepreneur expects to be able to pay the workers for 5 hours and that 2 hours will be paid by the buyer. This would result in an expected necessary working time of 5 hours and an expected surplus time of 2 hours. The expected abstract work would thus be 7 hours. Since the entrepreneur only manages to get 50 euros from the buyer as surplus value, she has to pay 50 euros more than planned from her wished income. The real socially necessary working time is thus 6 hours, the real surplus work only 1 hour. However, the abstract work of 7 hours comes about as planned. If the entrepreneur only succeeds in getting the costs reimbursed, but without receiving any surplus value, the entire working time would be socially necessary working time. Should the entrepreneur not even succeed in getting the costs fully reimbursed, the unpaid labor time would remain in the status of private work, and part of the costs of the constant capital C would remain partly in the status of private property. The socially necessary work would then be less than 7 hours. The entrepreneur would have to give away these private shares in the drone from her property to get anything back at all. This makes it clear that the socially necessary work, the real surplus work, and the abstract work are only given after the products have been sold. From many different sales, also from products from other production sites with other proportions of C and V, the socially average necessary work and the average surplus work can be calculated. This only succeeds after the values are formed on the market. That is completely logical for every entrepreneur. The value assignment on the market corresponds to the acceptance of qualities and quality increases of products. Quality increases are understood here as meaningful changes that lead to economically relevant weighted needs. A buyer is interested in the finished product. This is not freely available. Quality increases are acknowledged by providing something in return, mostly in the form of money. The quality increases are brought about by human or machine labor forces or by nature. A characteristic of all types of labor forces in the economic sense is that they are, or should be, paid according to their values. Machines are bought like slaves or leased like temporary workers. Parts of nature are bought or leased as well. Work actions do not lead directly to value. For the value, it is important to accept them. All the different types of labor forces contribute in the same way to the value formation related to the products of labor. The prerequisites for value creation are, first, non-free availability of the products, and second, weighted needs for the products of work that are sufficiently strong for the purchase. The work activities of paid workers are a typical reason for the non-free availability of goods, but not directly the value-creating factor. Marx's value formula does not directly describe value formation, but how value formation must take place on average if production and trade are to be continued, improved, and expanded. Let us now come to the practice of Marx's labor theory of value. It was applied in the socialist economic system as the basis of the economy. The first main problem in this application, the emission of money. In the GDR, the values were considered to have been created in the combines and companies according to plan, and the state bank circulated the money for these supposedly created values. However, the money was issued based on expected values, not as a counterpart to real values. The expected values were regarded as actually created values, which corresponded to the common doctrine in the GDR. Among other places, there was no mention of expected values. Example: TV sets. Shown are TVs sold at expected value, below expected value, or not sold at all. The money was circulated in full for all TV sets produced, since these TV sets supposedly represented produced values according to the labor theory of value. In this example, a total of 7,200 mark of the GDR was put into circulation for 9 devices of 800 mark each. But the real values differed from the expected values. The total value that was formed in reality was only 4,400 mark of the GDR. The real formation of value comprised only a part of the expected one. The money was circulated for all devices in the same amount. The funds for the real share of the volume of all goods to be distributed economically rightly entered the values of the labor forces and other income earners. The funds for the fictitious shares should not have been added to the values of the labor forces. This happened with many other products as well. Since the prices and production targets were kept constant over long periods of time, an extensive scarcity economy was created. The second main problem was the lack of market awareness. A look at an economy. Areas such as raw material extraction, production of auxiliary materials, standard components, assemblies, end product manufacturing and transport are shown. The prices for access to resources were fixed. Scarcity was not compensated for by prices. This led to stochastic phenomena when accessing resources. Both the number and the scope of the excesses could not be carried out in accordance with their importance for the whole economy. As a result, zombie companies could continue to work. Ineffective processes could be continued. Small groups of politicians decided on the meaning of production goals without even being able to process the influence on the overall economy and much more. The economy became increasingly ineffective until it collapsed. To the idea of central planning. This cannot be done comprehensively, considering all the effects. It would be targeted by lobbyists or would depend on the subjective feelings of the decision makers. Therefore, planned processes cannot be integrated organically into the overall economic organism. The whole economy is influenced enough by political guidelines. It should not and cannot be additionally controlled by central planning. To the idea of planning as needed based on input-output tables. Such planning is based on assumptions of constant input values, such as costs for raw materials, supplier products, gas, electricity, transport, use of human labor, use of machines and buildings, etc. In this way, no optimal use of resources is possible because the economic need is not absolute but relative, it is weighted. Competing access to resources is also dynamically recorded via the market. This is not possible with constant prices, as the socialist countries have shown more than clearly. The input variables do not remain constant in the planning period for various reasons. If you would record them flexibly, you would need the market with its value creation function, and you would get dynamic outputs. To planning using artificial intelligence. The interaction of competing accesses to resources cannot be simulated using artificial intelligence either. That would require the simulation of human consciousness processes. Product optimizations are only possible based on selected criteria. That means to a limited extent, which would lead to ineffectiveness and to a waste of resources. There can be no real equivalence to human market activity. To money and its functions. If the importance of money were to be weakened, the formation of value would take place on a different basis, because this would not eliminate the division of labor and exchange. Large-scale exchanges of goods for goods could not be meaningfully quantified, resulting in ineffective and inefficient use of resources. The use of work tickets would not reflect the meaningfulness and importance of the work performed, because it is not the work that is important, but the results. Conclusion. Value is a social relationship, a relationship entered by bartering partners on the market to exchange a commodity for an equivalent value. Value reflects the quantified abstract utility of a commodity and is attributed to both the commodity and the equivalent value for exchange in equal amounts. The barter partners only create value with the exchange on the market. Exchange corresponds to the socially relevant recognition of value. The abstract usefulness is merely an assumed usefulness that works so strongly that it leads to exchange. It is different from the concrete usefulness of the goods and is strongly influenced by the economic environment. Value is always based on work. People, machines, and parts of nature are used as workers. No type of workforce can create value directly. Only work results can lead to value forming. The updated interpretation of Marx's theory of value, presented here, also shows how value is formed regarding to ideas, archaeological finds, works of art, etc. With the updated interpretation of the theory of value, it becomes clear that the market cannot be replaced by central planning, even if this planning is to be carried out with the help of high-quality artificial intelligence, because human decisions, for instance in the case of competing access to resources, cannot be replaced by algorithms. With the formation of value on the market, it becomes clear which products are socially useful. It becomes clear that money, as part of the process of creating value, cannot be replaced or reduced in importance if the economy is to be made effective and efficient.